We don't have any overheads today, and so let's begin this with the Serenity Prayer. Grant me serenity to accept things I cannot change, the courage to change things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. All right, we left off last night with the final paragraph on 78, and we are going to pick up on page 83.
Someone asked last night if we were still going to have time to ask some questions. There were some questions about Step 9. There are great directions through all this, but the lady that said she had some questions about 9, we'll entertain those right now because we're going to be out of Step 9 in just a minute or two. Okay.
We do.
I don't think that mic's on.
My question about the amends, do you have any direction on a living amends?
There you
Can
go.
you hear me?
Top of the morning to you.
Hey.
Yeah.
I'm Jamie. I'm an alcoholic.
Jamie?
And our book gives us specific directions on direct amends, cleaning up the wreckage. What about living amends? The children, the wives? That's where my question goes, on the day-to-day cleaning that up.
Personally, I 8 years ago, I got out of a 21-year marriage. We have 3 beautiful kids that are still living now. And my youngest son was his first 4 years was in my madness. And my other 3 children, they saw a whole lot of it. Now, my oldest daughter could be the president of a temperance movement. I mean, the evils of the demon rum is just embedded in her. And she hates this disease. My second daughter can take it or leave it alone. She married a Frenchman. They have wine at dinner every night. They give their children wine at dinner. My youngest son is a professor at Georgia Southern University, and I don't think he's ever drank. My oldest son died from this disease when I was 8 years sober. So, you know, I'll give you one example. I was in a meeting after Scotty died, and I was sharing about how he is my best drinking partner. You know, he'd rather ride around my truck and drink whiskey and go to football practice, and I let that happen. That's how he and I bonded, I thought. And I was sharing that, and there was a lady that happened to be from California. She had about 35 years sober. And son, she raked me over the coals. How dare you sit here? You can't get them drunk. You can't get them sober. Get off the cross. We need the wood. I mean, just eat me alive in that meeting. And I had to go home and pray about that real hard. And I tell you what my God and I come up with. That is exactly the mindset I had when I was drinking. It ain't my fault. I ain't making him do it. I ain't pouring it down his throat. We change in sobriety. So the living amends that I have for my other children, they're not going to, and my grandchildren that I just got a text from, they don't see that in Charlie anymore. Now, I don't sit around and talk about I'm doing a living amends. I've been reborn through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. God has removed the obsession for me to drink today. So therefore, my main goal is to be maximum service to my God and the people about me. I should be a good grandfather. I should be a good human being today. I should be a law-abiding citizen today. Now, if you say that's living amends, and that's what I'm doing, I say I'm trying to live out the promises that this book says I'll do. I will have a new freedom and a new happiness. If this deal was about a new brand of misery, I'll go back to the other one. I'm comfortable with that one. I know exactly when the hammer falls. I know exactly what I can expect when I drink. Things are going to get bad. I know that. You know, people talk about, well, you got to find some balance in here. Well, here's my definition of balance. It's been 18 and a half years since I had a 357 Magnum pistol in my mouth. Now, there's your balance, period. You know, we're not here to tell people what to do, but what my sponsor told me my first night with him, he said, Charlie boy, just start being nice to people. It's never too early to start being nice. And when I'm nice to you, I reconnect with you. And when I reconnect with you, I reconnect with my God. Alcohol put me disconnected from something I should have never been disconnected from. You know, we read in here where I was to find God. He implanted that in me the day he gave me breath. And I let the world and alcohol disconnect me from that. So I'm not saying I'm answering your question. I'm just giving you my experience. You know. So if we want to label it or play with words, that's fine. That's fine. If that's a living amends, okay, great. That's a living amends. Well, all I'm trying to do is show my God how grateful I am every day that he's given me this grace that I don't think I deserve. You know, thank goodness I'm not judge and jury of Charlie out. I'd be bobbing for apples laced with razor blades in a vat of alcohol in the pits of hell. That's where I'd sentence me. You know. So now I'm in Orange County, California on a beautiful Sunday talking to people that I love very much, and I don't even know your name. So I'll hush.
Anybody else got any questions? To kind of segue into what this dialogue that just happened was, on the top of page 83, down in the bottom, near the bottom of that paragraph, it says, asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. I think that's fitting for what that question was. But we're going to pick up, again, still segueing into that question, in the second full paragraph on page 83.
What Larry just told is the 9th step prayer, if you want to put it in your margin. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it.
And you notice the squiggly writing there. It's not a suggestion. I mean, I said it sometime earlier in the weekend. I'm a great salesperson. The thing you got to pay attention to with Larry Scott is the way I'm walking, because I talk a great game. But if I'm not living it, what kind of a sponsor am I? What kind of a member of society am I? You know, I don't want to hurt no more of God's kids. I just don't want to do that. I don't want to hurt myself anymore. And I've done that. So it's not just a theory. I got to live it.
Now, unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not to urge them. We should not talk down incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter.
Last night, on the way to dinner, this question came up about those that can't be seen. And I'll make this brief. I have a sister-in-law married to my oldest brother. And she would prefer that I lived on a different planet so she didn't have to breathe the air that I exhale. And I harmed her. But for 16 years, I hung on to the idea that when I made that amends face-to-face to her, that she was going to pat me on the back and say, "Oh, Larry, it wasn't that bad. How about coming over Sunday for some good fried chicken and we'll have a pool party?" Well, my sponsor for years would say, write her a letter. And I said, no, because I wanted it to go down the way that I wanted it to go down. I want to get back into my brother's home. I want to put that family back together. Hear the I, me. Well, finally, one day, 16 years down the road, I was sitting at my desk one day, and right out of the blue, she entered into my head and was just eating me alive. And she was blocking me. So I called my sponsor and I said, "Bill, I don't know what to do, buddy. It's 16 years and I haven't been able to. I've been in the same room with this woman, but there's nothing. The energy she's giving off, she lets me know that she's not approachable." So Bill said, "Write the letter." I said, "Okay." So I wrote the letter, a couple of paragraphs, very generic, to the best of my ability, making the amends for what I had done. But when I wrote that letter, I had no fantasy that when that letter arrived that there was going to be any communication once she opened it. So I called my sponsor, I read it to him, he said, "Good letter, mail it." So I put it in the envelope, licked the envelope, put a stamp on it. I walked out to my mailbox. I opened the mailbox door, I laid it in there, I shut the door. And when I grabbed that flag and pulled it up, I got free. And it happened just like that. I don't mean to be dramatic, but that's the way it happened. If I had hair, it'd be sticking straight up right now. Because when I lifted that flag, I didn't have any expectations about pool parties and fried chicken. And I've seen that woman since, and that letter wasn't discussed. I'm free. I don't know what she's doing and really don't care. I'm free today. She owns no real estate in my head anymore. And there are other people that can't be seen. There are the dead, those babies that were aborted, those people that are in maximum security that you can't get to. But the book just told us that they've got an amends coming if they ever cross my path. And to the dead, that's a good letter. And my experience, when I have a guy write a letter to the dead, whether it's an unborn child or a parent or whatever, we burn that letter. And this is my experience. No, not a lot of hocus pocus. When that smoke goes up, who says that letter isn't arriving to the addressee? I don't know. But I get free.
The letters are very instrumental, I believe, but for my guys that we've done, that situations happen. If the grave is, if we can reach the grave, in other words, if it's in town or not too far off, or we'll go to that grave and we talk to that grave. That's as direct as we can get. The letter's fine, write all the letters you want. But to be on your knees in front of your father's headstone, pray the prayers that we know how to pray, and just talk to him, there's some real healing right there too. And that way, that's as close as I can get, is right there. And that's what I tell my guys. We're going to get as close as we can get. And so it's just another way. Not saying that's the right way or the wrong way. The letters are fine. Write them all. Write them. I'm certainly not saying don't write them. But what I am saying, if you can get close to the source, maybe you can just get 6 foot as far as you can get. That's the limit. At least you're there. And we've made a lot of amends at grave sites.
It all comes back to the intention.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, who the hell knows if somebody in that grave is receiving an amends or if they're getting it out of smoke? It's your intention. It's about getting free, man. How free do you want to be?
Absolutely. Now, there may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. So here Bill is emphasized, we don't worry about them. Don't go into that morbid reflection and carry that weight with you. You know you would if you could. And if God makes the opportunity arise, you're sitting on G waiting on O. But don't walk around in that veil of tears, is what Bill's suggesting we do. Get on with life, and go help somebody. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. And there may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases. But we don't delay if it can be avoided. Now, we should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping.
Servile or scraping. I'm normally a little more prepared than this. Servile.
Feeling less.
Slave-like in attitude. Submissive. Feeling less than. Scraping is aggravating. Scraping. Irritating, harsh, quarrelsome, or aggravating. My old partner, Christian, used to do this visual where he'd take a $10 bill and he'd walk over to this young lady in the front and he'd say, "Here's your damn money. Now you got another amends to make."
You know, we read 12 of the 9-step promises about every meeting, or in Savannah we do, or in Georgia. Why in the world we don't read the first promise right here is beyond me, but we don't. Here's the first promise of our 9-step promises. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. Why our newcomers can't hear that at their first meeting is beyond me.
Because yesterday in that 4-step inventory process, the basic instincts of life that we went over, the very first column was self-esteem. I mean, I've never met anybody that walked into our rooms all happy and well-adjusted. You know, we come in here with our tail between our legs looking at our shoes. You know, it takes some experience of being around people. We're really not bad people. This isn't a moral issue. We're going to beat that dog until he's dead. This is about, we have a disease, an obsession of the mind, and the allergy of the body. And as a byproduct of that, my self-esteem is in the toilet. When my self-esteem's in the toilet, God's people don't think very well of me. That's my perception. But as God's people, we stand on our feet and we don't have to crawl before anyone.
If we are careful and meticulous about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we're halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We'll not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away.
Self-seeking. Do you understand? You guys understand what that term means? I'll give you a ride to the meeting, but what's in it for me? It always comes back to me. It's not selfless.
Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change.
And this next one is, there's, my opinion, it needs a comma in there. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. What they've done right there is just given us a promise that God's there. I mentioned yesterday I'm self-employed, and on any given day I'm in poverty line based on the economy. I'm a floor covering dealer. But God has always had me, because I've had economic insecurity, but I don't have to fear it anymore. I live in the knowledge and the faith that God is going to show up. I called my sponsor one time, and he said, God's going to show up, Larry. He always has, hasn't he? I said, yeah. I said, I just wish he'd look at his watch, because now's the time. He goes, God made watches. He doesn't need to wear one. Click. I got it, man. Yeah.
We will instinctively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. And we'll suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises or out of reach promises? We think not. They're being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly with a spiritual experience, or sometimes slowly with a spiritual awakening. But they will always materialize if we work for them.
Now, as we just concluded step 9, any questions on that? We're going to go kind of in depth on these next 2 steps because they're misunderstood amongst us, our fellowship.
If you want to write in your margin there on page 84, refer to page 52. And that's where your bedevilments are when we was reading those, how we were maladjusted to life and couldn't fit in and all that. And then compare that to those promises we just read and see hopefully where your life's changed. It's a good barometer or how far I've gotten in 31 pages.
The next 3 steps that were the final 3 steps, 10, 11, and 12, our fellowship calls them maintenance steps. They're not maintenance steps. They're growth steps. I mean, once I reach a certain level, I don't want to get to that level and hang. I want to continue to grow. In the book, this next paragraph, they're going to use the word continue 4 times. And they're going to tell us that these are growth steps. Amen. So 10, 11, and 12 are growth steps. As we practice these steps, we maintain what we got, but we're also growing toward becoming a better person, a better member of society.
The maintenance is the maintenance of your growth. It doesn't mean stand still. You maintain your growth constantly. This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any mistakes as we go along.
And then they're going to use a strong word. We vigorously, forcefully, and energetically
commence this way of living as we clean up the past.
So when you're in your 9th step amends is when you begin this process. Because I called Kip back a few years ago. I said, man, I don't know about this. I'm not finished with 9. I can't find these people. He said, neither am I. But if they show up, I'm willing. If they ever pop up on the radar, they've got an amends coming. So it says that we begin this, we commence this way of living as we clean up the past. So don't wait before you start doing 10, 11, and 12.
Yeah. Step 10 is a walking around step. This is how I interact with you from the time I get up and get into the public's eye until I retire at night.
It gives you a promise here. It says, we have entered the world of the Spirit. That's your 4th dimension, a conscious contact with God.
Or if you will, in that spiritual awakening, that's the psychic change. When we enter the world of the Spirit, we have that psychic change.
And then to validate the growth steps, it says, our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness.
This is not an overnight matter.
So there's your time frame.
It should continue for a lifetime.
There you go.
Now, see if we're not reviewing all of our steps as we read this next.
You're going to need your pen here because we're going to pull all the steps out of this.
Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear.
Step 4, when these crop up, not if.
We ask God at once to remove them.
We pray, 6, and this is 6 and 7.
We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone.
Discussing it with someone immediately would be 5. Making amends would be 8 and 9.
Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help.
Step 12.
Love and tolerance of others is our code.
You know, a lot of people don't realize how much information is in that one paragraph right there, because we look at these off-the-wall steps that are hanging in our meetings, and it says we continue to take personal inventory when we're wrong, promptly admit it. There's so much more to this step. And then you're going to have people, and if you're in this room and I step on your toes, sorry.
Yeah.
Please listen. They'll say, well, I write a 10th step every night. Really? What were you doing all damn day? There's nothing about writing, and if you want to write, that's cool, but this is a walking around step. If you're doing a review at night, you're doing 11, and we're going to point that out to you. Yeah. But there's nothing in here about writing a step at night, and 10, there's nothing about a nighttime step. It's a daytime walking around, socializing with y'all. I need a step to deal with y'all, and this is it.
Yeah, a code is a law, the way we conduct ourselves, how we interact with each other. So Alcoholics Anonymous must have a law. It says it's just nothing but suggestions. But a law is something you should adhere to. Well, it says love and tolerance is our law. Love and tolerance of each other and the people about us.
And the next paragraph are the 10th step promises.
And also, we're going to review step 1A. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. By this time, step 2, sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. In other words, the obsession to drink has been removed. If tempted, recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically.
Bill tickles me right here. He tells us that we've recovered like 4 different times in 2 lines. Listen up. It's happened automatically.
Yeah, we will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part.
That's a couple of times.
It just comes.
There's the third one.
That is the miracle of it. We're not fighting it, neither we're avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected.
There it is again.
We have not even sworn off.
And again.
Instead, the problem has been removed.
And again.
It does not exist for us.
And again.
We're neither cocky nor we're afraid. That is our experience. That is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition.
And that last one's a caveat. All of this stuff is what you can expect if you are in fit spiritual condition.
And this is how I'm taking step 10, all this right here. If I do all of this, this is the proof that I have taken step 10 today. All of this is God's grace, every bit of it. Bill points it out that I'm not doing this, Charlie. You're not doing it, Charlie. This is God's grace. You've been placed in a position of neutrality. I don't know how many gearheads we have around here, but if you got a standard transmission, you can kick it up in neutral, and it'll sit there. But it ain't that hard to throw it back up in gear. So all I have to do is quit being spiritually fit. And that sucker will jump into a gear, and I'm off to the races. Clutch or no clutch. It just happens.
And this next line, it says, it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on your laurels. Laurel is a past achievement. As I sit here today with 24 plus years, I cannot stay sober this day on a first step I did 24 and a half years ago. A past achievement. I can't stay sober today on the things I did last year, even last week. The word laurel, back in the day, the Roman emperors, when they would win a battle, they would give them that little garland wreath, and they'd wear it on their head, and that was a sign that they had accomplished something in battle or something in government or whatever the case may be. But if they were to take that thing off and sit it in the chair and sit down on it, that's what we're talking about. We've got to continue to be vigilant, to continue to do this work, to grow, to continue to grow, to continue to help God's kids. And I hate to keep blowing smoke up the Chapter 7's butt, but you guys are a great example of being vigilant. You're on the front lines and in the trenches doing this deal. And what an honor to be invited by you guys. Y'all set an example in a bar pretty doggone high for me, because I'm going to be busy when I get back to Atlanta, Georgia.
And I, too, thank you for being amongst you. And you know, Larry Boyd and I get to do these book studies, at least one a month, somewhere across this country, or maybe into another country. And a lot of times we finish this and we have some nice accolades. People thank us for coming. And we look at each other and say, God, I hope one of them heard us. I mean, there are people who come to book studies with no books. You know, a lady told Larry, I've got mine on my phone. He said, oh, yeah, how do you underline on that? You know?
Yeah.
If we're not taking any action, we're here at a book reading, you know? Hell, we could do that over at that taco place, couldn't we? Okay.
That's an idea.
Yes, an idea. Because we're headed for trouble if we do.
Yeah.
For alcohol is a subtle foe. We're not cured of alcoholism. Now, why in the world would Bill Wilson put that in there? Maybe it's so after 18 and a half years, Charlie, you can stand in front of anybody in an AA meeting and take step 1A. If I'm cured, I can't take step 1A. I don't have a choice in drink. I don't have it any more today than I did December 3rd, 1993 in that 7-9 jail cell. You know, that's how strong alcoholism is in Charlie Ave. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition.
The tag on my car says recovered. I love that word. I think y'all know that. You've spent 3 days with me. And every now and then, I'll go to my car after a book study, or hell, it could be in a grocery store parking lot, and there'll be a piece of scratch paper on my windshield that says, what we have is we're not recovered. We never recover. We're not cured. And they quote this passage here. And I'm just going, really? Do you have a book? Have you read the book? But it's just a scream. And I get challenged.
Well, it's real clear what we recover from.
Is a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Let me put it real clear. I'm going to die with alcoholism. Everybody in this room, if you're a real alcoholic, you're going to die with it. But if I continue to do what is outlined in this book, I'm not going to die from it. Make sense? If I hadn't recovered, give you an example. What's your name, young man? Zach? If I were to reach in my back pocket and pull out that little .32 automatic and walk over to Zach and pop a round in his foot, Zach's got a couple of choices here. He does. He could ask his buddy there to take him back in the kitchen and get some methylate and a Band-Aid and maybe pour some peroxide on it and come back out and begin the book or resume the book study. That's one choice. The other one, he could hobble back to the back door and jump in Kip's truck with him and go over to the medical center and have the bullet removed, have the wound cleaned up, maybe some bone reconstruction, get a pop of antibiotics in his butt, and get the wound sewed up and let it recover, let it heal. Or he can just be recovering and hoping for the best. Make sense? I don't know about Zach, but I'm going to the medical center. You know? Isn't that what you choose, Zach?
You can recover from the gunshot wound, but you always have a gunshot wound.
Yep, you'll always have the scar from it. My life is scarred from my alcoholism. But if I walked in here and all you offered me was a life of recovering, I don't know that I'd have stuck around. But I recovered. Somewhere between steps 2 and step 7, God intervened, And I don't walk around wringing my hands thinking about drinking whiskey and doing those other outside issues anymore. And the book tells me that 37 times. And for those that weren't here on the first night, the word recovering is in our book twice. It's in to wives, they're talking about to father that's recovering, and it's mentioned in a footnote back over in the family afterward. There's nothing wrong with that. But we emphasize the word recovered, past tense, because it's in here so doggone many times. And that's the promise that I hung on to until it happened for me.
All right, we're still in step 10, and it says every day is a day. It does not say every night we take step 10.
What day?
Every day, Larry boy.
Oh.
Even Sunday. No amnesty. We must carry the vision of God's will into all our activities. So how do we do that? We ask for directions, so here's your 10th step prayer. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. So that means not at night, Charlie boy, laying in your bed rubbing your dog's head. It's out hanging off that pole that you have to climb every day, or climbing that cell tower 300 feet up in there, hanging those fins. You got to take it with you, Charlie boy. Don't leave it on the ground. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will.
For 85 pages, they've taken our will away. So self-will was our issue, and they've just given it back to you. But they've told us what the proper use of that will was. Charlie mentioned rubbing his dog's head. You know what his dog's name is? Charlie.
I have sometimer's disease. Sometimes I remember and I don't, so everything's named Charlie. Except Sugarfoot. That's my motorcycle. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed these directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious.
If we have carefully followed directions, we go back to that hummingbird cake recipe. Try and make chocolate chip cookies without the chocolate chips. You see where I'm going with this? It's not a pick and choose. It's not a grocery list. It's not a wish list for Santa Claus. If you want what they got, you got to do what they did. And what they did is right here. They wrote it down for us.
We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense.
And we're going to talk about this sixth sense in a couple of pages.
And this is how we're going to get this sixth sense. But we must go further, and that means more action. Step 11.
Any questions on 10? Okay.
Suggest prayer and meditation. So evidently that's how we get that sixth sense, through prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. It works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. It would be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions.
What they're saying here is develop your own prayer life. When I got here, I'm going to go to my grave not only with alcoholism, I'm going to go to my grave as a seeker. I'm always interested in your path, a path of how people seek God, what their spiritual path is, and other things. I'm a seeker. And early on, I can remember back in the day when I was still using, the Jehovah's Witness would come to the door, and I would take off all my clothes and open the door naked. I got sober, and they knocked on the door on a Saturday, and I opened the door, and it was a couple of ladies from New Orleans, and they came in, and they gave me the Watchtower, and I gave them my copy of Came to Believe, and we sat down and talked about Cajun cooking. And then the Mormon boys came up with that little thin ties in their bicycles, and we ate chocolate chip cookies and drank that sweet Southern iced tea and watched basketball. And we talked. They gave me the Book of Mormon, and I gave them a copy of Came to Believe. Because I'm brand new. I'm just weeks or months away from my last deal. but I was seeking. I wanted to see what that was about. I've refused them and rejected them all my life. Why do you keep knocking on my door? Are you one of God's messengers? So I poked around in there, and I poked my head into the Episcopal Church, and I poked my head over in the Unity Church, and through this path, a couple of ladies 18 years ago showed up at an AA clubhouse in Atlanta. They didn't just show up, they were fixtures there, and they were always so damn happy. I mean, they were always just grinning, cute and grinning. So I went up to one of them one day. I said, Judy, what is it about you and Judith? Y'all are always so cotton-picking happy. Oh, she said, well, we've been prayer partners for 15 years. I said, really? And so she shared this information with me, and I'm not suggesting this to you. I'm sharing my experience. A guy, a recovered Unity minister by the name of Jack Boland out of Missouri, he wrote a book called The Mastermind Prayer Principle, and it's a new theory, a new twist on an old theory out of Matthew, which is where two or more of you are gathered, I'm there as well. And Napoleon Hill used it in a thing he called the Mastermind Principle in a book he wrote some years ago. So we bought this book, this partner of mine and I, 18 years ago, and we read the book, and it's a workbook. And we authored or we penned this thing, and we've been doing it routinely every week, 7:30 before our big book study. And any week you can walk in and Sam asked me about it earlier. I think it was yesterday. We do this every week. Before we started here Friday, a group of men from here and myself and Charlie, we circled up and did this. And what we do is we hold hands, and I read and open with prayer requests, go around the room, and then someone reads the close. Again, if you want this information, I'll send it to you. There's a guy here in California, I heard about this on XA speakers or something, and he just shot me an email Friday night when we got back to the room, and he began this group last week, and they're already seeing tangible results or the answered prayers as a result. God, we admit, what Jack did is he took the 12 steps and he boiled them down to 8. You can pick them up as I read this. God, we admit that we are powerless to solve our problems and to improve our lives. We need your help. We've come to believe that you can change our lives, and we realize that self-defeating thinking is the cause of our problems, unhappiness, fears, and failures. We are ready to have our beliefs and attitudes changed that our lives may be transformed. We have made a decision to surrender our will and life to you and ask to be changed. We forgive ourselves for all our mistakes and shortcomings. We also forgive all persons, places, and institutions that may have caused us harm. Then the prayers go around the circle. And then the close is, we give thanks that you are responding to our needs, and we assume the same feelings we would have if our requests were fulfilled. We now have a covenant in which it is agreed that you are supplying us with an abundance of all things necessary to live a successful and happy life. We dedicate ourselves to be of maximum service to you and to those around us, to live in a manner that sets the highest example for others to follow, and to remain responsive to your guidance. We go forth with a spirit of enthusiasm, excitement, and expectancy. We are at peace. So, it says, we believe we can make some valuable suggestions. I've poked around and I said, what are you doing? How do you talk to God? Where do you worship? And that's what the book is suggesting. Develop your own prayer life. And if you start seeking, I promise you, you'll find a path if you don't have one. But if you're interested, I got it.
I let a Seventh-day Adventist in my house once.
Yeah, how'd that work out?
Well, he walked in and he looked at me and I looked at him. He looked at me and I looked at him. I said, well, what do you want to talk about, partner? He said, I don't know. I never got this far before.
Stop it, Charlie. Now, we've talked about the clear-cut directions on taking step 10 and 11. What does step 11 say here, Charlie?
Well, it says when we retire at night.
Huh.
Why would that burn? We're going to take the steps. We constructively review our day.
Not destructively, constructively.
Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Step 4. Do we owe an apology? Step 8 or 9. Have we kept something to ourselves we should be discussed with another person at once? Step 5. Were we kind and loving toward all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? Or were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflections, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. So now, Charlie, may you want to pray.
Now, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 8 prayers here in this 11th step.
Now, after making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what constructive measures should be taken.
There's your first one.
Upon awakening.
This is still in 11.
So I go to bed with step 11, and I wake up with step 11. Let us think about the 24 hours ahead.
Doesn't say anything about planning them. Just let me think about it.
We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we pray again. We ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives.
Guys, I don't know if it's in the packet. I know Tyler and I talked about it. Is there a 10th-step morning prayer in your packet? If there is, someone sent it to me. It's in there. And what that is a compilation that somebody put together of all the prayers in the 11th step, and it's really pretty cool. There you go.
Now, under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance, for after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed upon a much higher plane when our thinking is clear of wrong motives.
There's a 10th-step promise.
You know, when we talk about meditation, a lot of people are thinking about, or I thought about, I got to get down in the lotus position and pinch my fingers and say, and well, I can get in the lotus position by myself, but I need help getting out of it. But if you go through history, in time of war, it's documented that the generals would go into meditation. What they were actually doing was planning the battle, where they could strategically place their troops, have the worst damage inflicted on the enemy, and save as many of our men as they could. They meditated about it, just like this. They got a game plan. And that's what meditation is getting a game plan, just like it was written here. We think about it. We constructively think, what do I need? How can I be of maximum use today? Larry Boy does it every morning as soon as he knows he's breathing, and he gave it to me. When I open my eyes and I know that I'm actually breathing, the first thing out of my mouth or out of my mind is, good morning, God. What can I do for you today? Now, that's meditation. I'm getting a game plan. I'm not just silencing my mind and waiting for the birds to sing and tell me what to do. God gave me a brain to use. It's how am I going to react with you today? I got some chores that's got to be done. I need to get them in line, what I need to do. My type of work, there's steps you take. And if I start at the last step before I do the first step, it's not going to work because the groundwork's not laid. And that's exactly what we're doing in the morning, supposedly, if I'm in fit spiritual condition and trying to improve this God consciousness.
My sponsor asked me one day, I called him up with a real busy mind one morning, and he said, Larry, walk with me for a second. He says, when you wake up, what do you do? I said, well, I wake up, and I roll right out of bed on my knees. I've done it for 24 years. And I do my prayers. He says, you don't go to the bathroom or get coffee going? I said, no. I roll right out of my bed. I've been doing it 24 years. If somebody were to tie me to my damn bed and I couldn't get out on my knees in the morning, I'd go crazy because I've got a habit formed now, see. He said, okay, and then what do you do? I said, I'll probably pee and then go make the coffee and start doing meditations. He said, okay. He said, are you open to a suggestion? I said, I am, Bob. He says, I've known you for 20-something years. And he says, you got a busy mind. I said, yeah, I do. He says, let's try this, Larry. He says, as soon as you know you're alive, not when you get up, not when you pray, just as soon as you know that you made it through the night and you're alive, just try this. Just say, good morning, God. What can I do for you today? He says, what you're doing is you're inserting a little insurance policy that you don't start thinking about what's going to happen once your feet hit the floor. What's happened, you've hooked up with God right out of the gate. Now, you may push him away, but he says the chances are a little less if you'll just hook up right out of the gate. And I said, okay. And I've been doing it ever since. I thought it was cornball as hell. And then all of a sudden, it's become a way of life for me.
Now, under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance, for after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is clear of wrong motives. In thinking about our day, we may face indecisions. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we pray again. We ask God for inspiration, an intuitive thought, or a decision. We relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. We're often surprised how the right answers will come after we have tried this for a while. In other words, we're practicing faith. That's what it's saying. We're practicing faith.
2 pages ago, they mentioned the vital sixth sense. It says, what used to be the hunch or occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. There it is. Gradually. Easy. Easy. Because I got to tell you, I can walk into a Harley store, and I think buying that big old piece of chrome on the wall is God's will. So justified insanity.
Yeah, our flawed thinking becomes right thinking. Being still inexperienced and having just made conscious contact with God, so that means I'm doing this at 1 day sober or 18 years sober. When do I start my experience? Or when am I inexperienced? Probably 1 day sober. I'm inexperienced. But nobody says you have to wait until you've got a 50-year chip in your pocket to start praying to God. The authors of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous certainly didn't say that. It is not probable that we're going to be inspired all the time.
That's a promise.
We might pay for this presumption or belief in sorts of absurd or senseless actions and ideas. Nevertheless, we will find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on a plane of inspiration. We come to rely on it.
Promise.
Now, we usually conclude the period of meditation with a prayer, and that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be. That we'll be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. We ask especially for freedom from self-will and are careful to make no requests for ourselves only. Now, we may ask for ourselves, however, if others will be helped. We're careful never to pray for our own selfish needs. Many of us have wasted a lot of time doing that, and it doesn't work, and you can easily see why.
Some years ago, I did this book study for 10 years in a men's treatment center in Atlanta. And on Tuesday nights, this fellow Paul would come and he'd sit right here. Wore big, heavy horn-rimmed glasses, shaved head, inked up. Paul had been a tough guy. Paul worked at a grocery store stocking shelves, and he rode a bicycle to work every day. Rain, shine, sleet, or snow. Started sponsoring Paul. And he was all about, he would have fit right in with this Chapter 7 bunch. He was all about getting in the trenches and getting down and dirty with the new guys. And Paul came to me one night and he said, Larry, he says, I'm about due to have my driving privileges reinstated. I said, that's good, Paul. Let's talk about that. He said, well, my license was suspended in 7 different Georgia counties. And he says, in order to get them, I'm going to have to buy this heavy insurance. I'm going to have to get pay for an interlock device that you breathe into. And I'm going to have to go to these driver courses that are going to be very expensive. And I said, Paul, do you have the money for those things? He says, I do. I said, well, before you do all that, why don't we try this? Why don't you go down to the Driver's License Bureau on Confederate Avenue and talk to those people and see exactly where you stand with the state. He said, okay. He says, but I know where I stand. I said, just humor me. So he gets one of his boys, Jeff, to drive him down to the driver's license place about 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Paul walks up to the window and he said, ma'am, could you pull me up in the computer and tell me where I stand with the state of Georgia? And she said, absolutely. She says, you live on such and such a street in Marietta, Georgia? She says, I do. She says, that'll be $35. He says, no. He says, that can't be right. He said, would you look again? She says, your daddy's name is so-and-so and blah, blah, blah. And he says, yes, ma'am. She says, that's $35. He said, hang on a minute. And he stepped away from the window and he called me and he said, Larry, I'm going to use this phone, Charlie.
Okay.
Hey, Larry. We were in Akron and Charlie says, Larry, your phone's ringing. It was my glass case. He says, Larry, this lady tells me that it's only $35. And I said, Paul, take the license. He says, but I said, no, Paul, take the license. I said, you have slipped through the bureaucratic red tape. Just take the license. So he went back over and she handed him the license. And in Georgia, when you have your license suspended, they staple it to a document. And his license looked like a piece of a damn cheese grater. Well, he showed up back at the book study and he had that grin on his face and his teeth were all broke out. And he said, I got my license. I said, Paul, that's good. I said, do you have a car? He said, no. I said, Paul, let me ask you a question. When you get a car, what are you going to do with it? He said, well, I'm going to go over to the men's extension and pick up them homeless drunks and take them to meetings. I said, Paul, when you go home tonight, you ask God for a car. He said, okay. This is on a Tuesday night. Wednesday morning, Paul got up at 7 o'clock and he went to the Breakfast Club meeting at the Howe Place in Woodstock, Georgia. And Paul always carried that large print big book. And he walked into that meeting that morning and he ran into a cat in there that he hadn't seen in 15 years that he went to high school with. And they caught up on old times. It sure is good to see you. Didn't you know you were in AA? How's your mama and them, you know? And the guy said, Paul, do you need a car? Paul says, I do. He said, well, you know, the wife and I just bought this new Honda Accord. It's a really neat car, but we've got this little Honda Civic that we've had for years, and we just had a timing belt put on it, and it's in good shape. Would you be interested in that? He says, yes, I would. He says, how much? He says, no, just come get it. So Paul goes and gets this little car. The next Tuesday night, he pulled up to the book study, and he parked the car, and all 4 doors open. It looked like a damn clown car. Homeless drunks pouring out of it. And I said, Paul, that's great, buddy. He said, yeah. He says, I named her. I said, you did? He says, I said, what's your name her? He says, it's Lois. And I tell that story and I get choked up every time because I live it. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here today and tell you that if you go home and pray for a car, God's going to give you a car. That's not what happened. But he gave Paul Hill a car. And Paul never relented on his commitment. Every time you'd see Paul, it was full of drunks. And they were drunks from a homeless shelter. And now he lives in St. Johnsbury, Vermont, where Dr. Bob was born. And he's doing the same thing up there. Before we go any further, guys, why don't we take a 10 and come back and wrap this puppy up?